Okay, so we're gonna be following this guide. I'm gonna cover everything, and in description below you'll have the link to the completed file. So if you're in a rush, you can just look at the file, and then this will give you everything you need to know. Okay, so the very important thing we need to remember is that when you are doing import into another JavaScript file, you have to have .js extension. So just be aware of this. If it's not working, it could be that you're not putting .js. Because most of the time people just import like name and that's it, they leave it at that. But it has to be .js. Otherwise, unless you have a compiler, it's just not going to work. Okay, so another thing is positioning of the can also mess it up. You want to put your JS files normally at the end of the body tag. So you want them to be in here. Because you want the HTML to load, CSS to load, and JavaScript only after HTML to load. So that's another reason why it might be not working. Okay? And then the final warning is when you're importing and exporting between JavaScript files, it's fine. You don't need to do anything extra. But if you are putting, if your JavaScript file has imports and export in it and it's used in HTML, so for example, this file has no imports and exports, but if it did, you have to put type equals module. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. But you'll get a warning, honestly. You'll get a warning. So, starting repo is in here, so if you want to follow, you can get it in here. I'll link it in the description below, and I'll link this document in the description below. Alright, so we're going to be following this, and cheat sheet is going to be in here. It's messy. I was trying to categorize it, I know, but what can you do? It's just too much shite happening. Okay, so here we go. Let's start with, okay, so first thing you do is you clone the repo, which is this one here. Okay, so this will bring you to this. Now it looks scary, but there is nothing in it. You can ignore library. It's basically a JavaScript file and an HTML file. I'm using Angular. It's just I chose to do it because I'm practicing for Angular, but it will probably work inside standard vanilla HTML and JavaScript, right? Okay, so let's go. Let's start. So the first will be a function with an export that is named, and it's default. Okay, so it's a function, it's default, it's named, and we're gonna do an export. Okay. So here we're gonna create a file which is called proof that works JS. Okay. So everything we're gonna pull in here, and then we're going to I don't know. Let's do function proof that works. Let's do export default. So here are going to be all of our imports, and then at the moment you can shield. Just forget about anything. But I'm just trying to set up the process honestly a little bit. Okay, so we want to import this thing in here. But do we really need to do that? No, we don't need to do that, honestly. We just completely don't need to do that. Where's the delete button? We're just gonna put everything in here, and then we just... So here are gonna be our imports, and we're gonna run a function which is called proof that works in here. And we're just gonna run it. Proof that works. Console log proof that works. Okay. Okay, so at the moment we have set up everything perfectly because the console log is working. Okay. So note there is no type module, but you will see the error. I'll point out the error. Okay. All right. So let's do first. What are we doing? We're doing a function default named. Well, let me just do function x. Well, let me do all in one, just like this. Okay. So the first one is, what do we have? We have function default named export. Okay, so it's named. So we do export. So type export default function, and then your name of the function. Any name, like this. And then console log it. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it one. You guys can figure it out yourself, right? Okay. So now this is how you default export a function with a name. Okay. So now we're gonna import it. So we're gonna import like this. Oh, whoopsie. Any name from, where is that file? It's all in one. It's in here. Okay. So now we're going to run it. Right. Let's just put. Doesn't matter. So this is a function. We're going to run it in here. So to see that it works. Okay. Boom. Error. What's the problem? Because we are using the JavaScript file inside the HTML, with imports and export, you have to have the type equals module. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Okay. Okay, it's telling me something is not right. Apple and one aborted. 1 second. Oh my god, I got caught by my own mistake. So you see, when you see this, cannot get blah blah blah, it's because you have to have .js. You see, .js is going to work then. Okay? So we can see one is working. So this was imported correctly. Alright, so I showed you import and of the named function. Alright, so next one is gonna be no name. Okay? So next one is gonna be now. One note is that when you are using default exports, the name in here doesn't matter. You can put it as anything and it's still going to work. Default exports, when you're importing them, can be renamed. You see, it's still working. So this is why you're wondering, why is it like that? That's because this is because of the second condition, which is function default no name export. Okay, you can only have one default export inside of a file, so make sure that there's only one, otherwise it's not going to work. Oh my god. Okay, so it's going to be export, whoops, function, oh, export default, my apologies, default function no name, and then console log 2. Now you will notice that we didn't do anything in the imports, and now it's running the second one, which is 2. Why is that? That's because you can put any name on the default export with no name. Do you understand? The name doesn't really matter. Like this name is just like a placeholder. It doesn't really do anything. But most people, to avoid confusion, so that when you're tracking functions, it's a very, very good idea to always put the name and then synchronize it in here. But some people troll. I've seen it in projects multiple times. They just default export function and then rename it in here, then name it in here. So we can put name for unnamed export function. So you see it's still going to work. You see it's still running. So the problem with that is then the only way to track it is either by clicking on it like this. I click control. You see I click control and now it goes into the function. But sometimes, now if this control click does not work, you want to reload. You want to basically do this reload window. Sometimes it kicks in because you could have an extension that just does not allow you to do that. So sometimes, again, control click and it goes to it. Sometimes like there is battle of extensions. I noticed that if you reload, you control click, most of the time it works. Now, if that doesn't work, then you have to trace it manually like this. Right, there it is. But I'm telling you, this is troll. You're probably never gonna see it. Unnamed functions, it's just, it's horrendous. Most of the syntax is gonna be like this. Okay? Makes it very easy to trace. Because again, you see, you could be searching for it in here, and like, I mean, it's a nightmare. All right, so we're gonna be following the grid. Import, export, done. No name, export, import, done. Okay. Okay, so next we're gonna do. I'm gonna comment this out, and then we're gonna do. When we're gonna do, what are we gonna do? We're gonna do function. Whoops. Function non-default. Const. Export before const. Export before const syntax. So this one's very easy. It's basically, you write function. What is it? 3. And then we're gonna console log 3, right? So in situations like this, just put export in here, and then that's about it. The only difference is you have to, when you're importing, you have to put the little brackets like this. From, you see, like this. And then what's the name? There it is. Oh my god, I just remembered something, 1 second. I just remembered that you can do renaming as well, but I'll cover that later. Okay, so we stopped here. We need to call this function. So this should display 3, right? Whoops. Yeah, I accidentally shut down the server. Whoopsie. Yeah, so you see now we have 3. Okay. So we've done, what did we do? We've done this one. Object syntax. Okay. This one's Object syntax. So it's gonna be like this. You write function for fn. So console log 4. And then export like this. And the import is going to be, naturally, you can either do it this way, like this, or you can do it like this. Just add it in here because it's coming from the same file, whatever, you know, it's the same shiza. And then we call it in here, so this should be 4. Okay, there it is. There's the 4. Okay. So now we need to go to here, mark it as done. Mixed I'm gonna do later. I probably don't even need it to be here. Okay, so next is gonna be primitives, like arrays, objects, whatever. Arrays, objects, or strings, numbers, whatever you want, right? Okay, so now we're gonna have primitives default named. Well, honestly, there's no, well, okay. Remember, you can only have one default export per file. So, okay, so let's do export default. Well, first thing you need to create it, right? So const my var, what is it, 5 now? Yeah, my var 5 equals to 5 is string. And now we can export it. So export default my var 5, I guess. And now we can import it, right? From here. We're gonna have to console log it. See if it works, blah blah blah. There you go, you see it's working. Again, because this is default export, I don't know this for sure, but I'm certain that you can rename this into anything you want. My var 5 with new name, and it's still going to work. Because, yeah, it's still working. Why is that? Because default rules are always the same. The name is just a placeholder. Most of the time you can rename it on the import, but most people don't do that. They name it in here, and then they put it in here. Okay. Now this is a default, so we're gonna have to put it in here. Non-defaults. Okay. So next one is same as this one, only with, well, wait a sec, I need to mark in my little magical file. Whoopsie. There you go. Okay, so next is same as this, only without a name. So this is no name. So this one's going to be a bit confusing, but you have to remember that defaults, export, default 6 is also a string. You have to remember that the names in default exports are just They're just like placeholders, right? So again, you see there's literally no name in here, so you have to assign a name in here. So we have to assign a name to default variable with no name. Default export variable. So as you can see, this is working. See? Okay. Whoops, this should be export. Export. So exciting. I know it's like not exactly Star Wars, but it is what it is. It's programming, you know. You have to revise it to get strong. All right. So now this is done. This is done. Now let's do const syntax, right? So honestly, this is exactly the same as this mumbo jumbo. Like exactly the same. Only this is primitive. So again, we write our const. This is 7 const my 7 var. 7 is string. And then we just type export in here, and then that's it. And again, because it's coming from the same file, just put it in here. Or if you want, you can do like this. Remember, this is not a default export, so you have to put the little curly brackets around it. Am I recording or am I talking to myself? Okay, I'm recording. Good stuff. Okay, so now boom, from all one. But since it's the same file, we can just put it in here. It's going to work. So now we need to console log it. Console log. La 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 la. And then 7 should be. There it is. You see 7 is a string. And the final one, which is identical to this, syntax. So we need to create it first, so const my 8 var, 8 is string, and then export like so. Honestly, this syntax is kind of troll. Like, the reason why I'm showing you a second syntax like this is because occasionally you see it in projects, but it's very old. Nobody does that anymore. Most of the time when there's default, people export like this. Or something like kind of like this as well, you know, where you have export default and then the name. It's kind of like in that realm. Honestly, there is a third syntax for functions. I completely forgot about it. I'll do it. I'll do it now. 1 sec. Okay. Bottom line. We are exporting like this. Again, because it's a not a default export, we have to put the curly brackets. And now we're gonna console log it to see if it's going to work or not. Okay, so 8 is working. There you go, you see? You can see 8. Where is that Scheiße? It's in here. I covered const export and I covered this. Okay, so in functions there is another one which is called named. Syntax 2, I suppose. Whoops. it's identical to this one here. You see? It's just people, a lot of the times they do that. They do like this. Look. Where's the default syntax? Okay, so we need to remove this one. Remember, only one default syntax function, default named export syntax to. It looks like this. You create a function which is called what am I going to call it? AnyName2. Okay, AnyName2. Then we're going to console log AnyName2. AnyName2. And here you can just export default AnyName2. This is kind of like the way they do it in React. This is literally the way they do it. Only this is a component. And you see, so you create it and then you export it. It's exactly the same as in here. You see, primitive default named. You create it and then you export it as default. This is honestly probably the most common way to do it. Or this. It's just I'm kind of in my project I see both of them all the time. Okay, so again, because it's a well, let me just this function that's supposed to be here. Okay, so again, how do we import the default one? We put import and then any name to it. But since we're not going to be trolling, we're going to put any name to. We're going to synchronize the names. From, yeah. And then we're just going to run this function in here. Let's just run it. Just in here. Yeah, you see, so AnyName2 is running. You see, there it is. And again, I'll stress it again, you can put any name in here that you want. But just try not to do it, you know, it still works, you see. There it is. Try not to do it, because then you're gonna be digging. You're gonna be digging yourself into a problem, basically. Okay. So I showed you that. Here is an A. Okay, mixed. So oh, my apologies. Mixed is very, very easy. Okay, mixed is like super, super easy. I'm just gonna do. We do mixed example. So let's create a default. Let's create a function. Here is normal structure of how it's going to look like, and it's going to be mixed. So we'll create a function. We create a function. We call it. I don't know. Example 1. I'm going to console log example 1. Let's say you have a couple of variables. Let's say var1 const var2 like this. So there's two ways to do it. So one is you want to export default function. So it's probably going to be at the end of the file, which is going to look something like this. Like this. And now there's two ways to export these guys, right? So we can do like this, export var1 and var2. So you see we're utilizing the const, like this syntax here. You see this, where is it, where did it go? So you see this syntax is like brackets. So you can put multiple into the same bracket as if they were, you see like this one, it's identical to doing this. It makes no difference, it's going to be the same. Do you understand? So every time you write export, you see this export thing. Well, you don't need to write export, but I'm just saying that, you know, you want to export a function, you want to export a variable, you can just put it in here. But this syntax I don't like personally because it's confusing. Okay? And it's time consuming. Well, let me show you that's going to work, and then I'll show you how normally people do it in a project. Well, normally, honestly, people do it like this. Let me just delete this shite so you don't get confused. This is the way your file in a project, I'm talking about like when you're employed, this is what it's going to look like most of the time. Okay? So you see, if you're exporting non-defaults, you're gonna have export before a const or variable or a type or a function. If you're exporting default, it's gonna be probably something like this, or it's gonna be something like this. But it's honestly, I see both of them most of the time, but like, I prefer to do it this way. And for importing, so we have to mix both imports. Okay, so it's gonna be like blended like this import. So first is the default. So default, what was the name of the default? Like this, from mixed example. Okay, so let's run this function to see if it's working. So you see example 1 is running. Okay, so now the question is, how do we add these guys? We simply use this syntax with a, so comma, which is add more stuff basically. And then we use this syntax basically. You can just copy and paste it into here and change the variables, which is var1, var2, right? So now we want to console log these bad boys. Okay, so there it is, you see. Example 1 is running. Variable 1 was number, variable 2 was a string. You can put objects if you want, makes no difference. Whoopsie. So let's do export const my r equals 1, 2, 3, okay? Again, same ding dong. Put it into here. There's your array. Object is the same. I'm not going to do it. I mean, it's array object, same thing. So if you don't want to do it this way, you can also do it this way. Okay, so I'll change this so you can see that you can do it like this. Export default. So we're going to remove this, and then you can do export. But you see that this is a bit of a hassle, you know, because you have to remember, did I export it, did I not export it, and then here you have to remove. But honestly, well, let me test. It's probably gonna work with export anyway. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You see, it's complaining. So you have to remove the export statements. You see, like this. So now you see everything is working. But this is honestly, this is horrendous syntax. Like, I just don't really like it. It's just, yeah, it's like super rare. I honestly, in my project, I only seen, well, in 3 projects that I worked on, I've seen this only in TypeScript. Sometimes people use it in TypeScript, but most of the time that's kind of most of the time what you're gonna see. And you see it's working. Okay, so this is blend, so this is like mixed export. So we're talking about what do you do when you want to export a lot of different variables and default in the same file. This is how you do it. Just, this is your default. Again, you can put it any name, then comma, and then your default, non-defaults goes here, and then the file name, and then that's it, and then they work. Alright, so final one I'm going to show you is how to, I'm going to put this done in here. Now, default imports we already covered. Default imports we already covered. Because when, so this is renaming. When you are importing a default one, which is something like this, the name can be anything. I already told you. This can be one blah, it's still going to work. Example 1, yeah, you see, it's still going to work. So you see example 1 is running. So this name is kind of a placeholder, to be honest with you. Kind of like you see this syntax here. Export default function, no name, and then we give it a name in here. But again, nobody does that. Nobody does that. I'm just saying that, you know, sometimes you'll see it, especially in docs. Man, don't get me started on some docs. I mean, they just write this weird, confusing syntax that nobody ever uses in projects. For some reason, I have no idea, because they basically have, I honestly, I don't know. I can't understand why sometimes they have such confusing syntax in docs, you know. It makes it difficult, but anyway, it's a different topic. Okay, so the next one is how do you rename. Oh, the next one is, let's do, how do you import everything? So let's say we do not want to type this long syntax. We just want like an object with all the stuff in it, right? So we can do a star sign. Import all. So this symbol is all from, oh shit, you need to put as, yeah. Yeah, so as, and then you put in the name, which is any name, I don't know. My data. From, and then we're gonna go with this one here, example, okay? So now you will see that when we're gonna console log my data, all of these are gonna be in it as if it was an object. I'm not sure if it's going to work on, I don't know how the default is going to look like, honestly. Maybe you cannot do it with default. Let me see. Yeah, so you see, like, you have all of them in here. I wonder how do you access default. Let me just have a look. Because honestly, I've seen it done, but only in configurations, but not really in, like, when you're working with components and files, it's very unusual to see it. Something like this. Well, let's console log. Array is very easy. My array is like, will be, we want to access this one, so it's going to be object name dot whatever name is in here, my R. And you'll be able to see it then. You see, so there it is. So now the question is, how do we access the default one, which is something. Since there is no name, maybe it's like this. Oh, and we have to run it as well, right? We have to run it. Yeah, it's not running. Okay. Let me ask Cloudy 1 second. Cloudy is a, yeah. Alright, you cannot use star to default to import default, you see? You can only do it for non-defaults. So star is not going to work. So we can only do like this. What was the name of the function? Example 1. So we can only do like this. So this is basically a replacer for these guys. So then we can now run the function in here. Oy, 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 oy. Huh. Oh, wait a minute. I trolled hardcore. I literally trolled hardcore. Hold on a second. It's going to work. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I trolled. Honestly. Let me see. Yeah, it's working. Woo! Okay. I trolled. Yeah. There it is. So just basically you can do it. You can do it. My apologies. So you export and then you run it like this. That default is the key for it basically, and that's it. Now you're probably going to be wondering like, why is that called a module? I'm not going to get into it, but if you want to dig around. You see, like, this is actually a module with stuff in it. And there is actually a way to do it like this as well, which is export module. It's like export default module dot, and then you can put stuff onto it. But I've seen this syntax one time in my life when I was reading it was I think it was Joy validation scheme. It was some kind of docs I found. I was like, oh my god, what a weird syntax, and I've never seen it again. So I'm just not even gonna cover it because nobody uses it. And it was on backend, so this is not backend video, it's front end video. So, but just be aware that a file is basically a module with kind of like dot notation, and then you can put, it's like an object, and then you can stick stuff into it, right? That's why it's called a module. But for simplicity purposes, just think about it as a file with exports and imports, and one default export, and then exports of primitives, and that's it. Anything outside of that, you don't really need to know unless you want to nerd out like hardcore, you know. You're never gonna use it, so why bother, you know? Okay, okay, so that's syntax for a star. Now I kind of also covered as syntax, but I'll show you another way of doing it. Well, I'll show you another version. Like, I'll show you what as syntax means. As is like a renaming, okay? It's basically renaming. So let's say we are importing. Let's do variable 2. Okay, so let's just console log remove all of this mumbo jumbo. Let's remove all. Well, we don't really need this mumbo jumbo. So let's say we are just importing from mixed vars, okay? That's what we have. We're gonna console log it. Oh shit, it already exists, but doesn't matter. Okay, so what do we have here? We have var2. Now, occasionally you're gonna run into a problem where there are multiple var2. Sometimes the name of something is conflicting with it, right? So you can just rename it as var from mixed 2. You see? Now you can use this. And it's going to work. Right? So the easiest way to think about it is the word as means rename to this. Import this, rename to this. So it's exactly the same as this. And then that's about it. I think that's absolutely everything. So I probably want to put a note in here. So to use default as my data.default. And then that's pretty much it. Okay. I'll push all of this into the repo, so everything is gonna be below. I might make another doc to make it like examples, copy and paste examples, because I know it's it's a lot of stuff. But once you understand it, it's. But anyway, the video is finished. If you have any questions, if you need more material or kind of cheat sheets, they're gonna be in the description below. All right, take care. Bye bye.